Ambassador Ed McMullen,
Yes.
and Dr. Christina Rahm. Thank you for joining us.
Back to you.
All right, so I'm going to start with you, Mr. Ambassador. Lots happening as an American in the United States in politics right now. So tell me what is currently going down. What should Americans or the rest of the world, what should they know?
Well, I think Americans are deep in it right now, right? We have the national elections coming up. So in the process of that, a year before that, in November, is the national election. And you have the primaries. So we have a Republican primary that's pretty contested, but we've had a front runner in Donald Trump now, President Trump, for the past 8 months. He's longer than that, almost a year now. He's been 20, 30, 40 points ahead in most states, early states. So we get through that, and then President Biden, actually on the Democrat side, has not had a challenge from the Democrat. There is announced opposition, but they're not really contesting. I mean, the president is an incumbent, and President Biden is getting through the primaries pretty much unscathed. So he will be the nominee. Everyone you talk to in South Carolina, we have a Congressman, Clyburn, who is very close to the president. They moved the primary to South Carolina, so the Democrat primary, the first one, will be in South Carolina. And everyone is speculating that President Biden will get through that quickly, get to the convention, be nominated, and he'll be the nominee. The Republicans are a little different because we have a president now, a former president, who historically it's only been done once, where he was defeated in 2020, and then he's running again and doing exceedingly well. So you have with the President Trump now the first of the primaries in Iowa, the first one, where it was speculated he would not do well, and there's all kinds of media speculation, but the president won with nearly a 40-point margin. It was huge, and he won every county in Iowa with the exception of one, which he only lost by 1 vote. So historic precedence for the president to win Iowa that well. He goes into New Hampshire. The New Hampshire primary is in 2 weeks. That primary, he's doing very well, leading again. Nikki Haley, who is my former governor in South Carolina and good friend, is having a tough time getting some traction. But Democrats can vote in New Hampshire. So there are a lot of Democrats who will come over from Massachusetts to try and impact that election and embarrass President Trump. It's very tough to work, because historically it's been attempted, never successful. And then you have DeSantis, Governor DeSantis from Florida, and a good man who's run a tough race. He came in second in Iowa. In New Hampshire, he is contesting and should do okay. But all expectations are that after New Hampshire, you go to Nevada, President Trump will win huge. Then you go to South Carolina, President Trump's ahead by 40 points in Nikki Haley's home state. So if he wins against Nikki Haley's home state with a 20-point margin, it would be huge. And then you go into Super Tuesday and the primary elections are over. So right now it looks like President Biden will be the Democrat nominee, and the Republicans will have President Trump as their nominee. And if you watch President Trump, you're seeing a very focused candidate, a very different candidate from what you saw in 2016 and 2020. A real urgency, I think, in his mind that there are key issues that have to be addressed in the U.S. Immigration, the economy, foreign policy. Those are really the focus of the president right now. And I think it's going to be a tough challenge for the both of them. The Republicans and Democrats are pretty much 50-50. Liberals and conservatives, 50-50 in the country. So that's where we are. And by July, we will have the conventions, the Democrat-Republican conventions. The nominees will be official, and the official general election begins. But in likelihood, the general election could start sooner if President Trump secures that nomination early.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I'm very curious to know, Dr. Rahm, you are a very successful businesswoman. You're a mother, and what's important to you? As you are somebody who has been a donor. One day I hope to see you as an ambassador, because I consider you a dear friend. What do you look for in a leader? Especially what the United States needs, and as a woman who travels around the world, you're hearing conversations as well. What do you think Well, what do you see?
So it's interesting. I have been traveling around the world, and I've worked in 89 countries. And so I do ask when I meet with other prime ministers and presidents and governments what they think about our country, the United States, and what their belief is. And I can tell you it's kind of, it's split, but there's a lot of people that are very interested in Donald Trump coming back into the political arena as president because of his influence internationally. But then you have some countries, obviously, with Biden. As a businesswoman and a scientist, and a mother, I'm very interested in, of course, healthcare and which president will be helping us make a transition to having better healthcare throughout the world, whether it's nutritional supplements or pharmaceutical products. There's a shift right now that's happening to combine both of those. So I'm looking for a president, to be honest, that will really facilitate that so that we can continue to be one of the top leaders in healthcare in the United States throughout the world. That's important to me because I don't want us to lose that edge.
So it's interesting what you said there, and I also want to come back to you, Mr. Ambassador. It is very easy to attack somebody else and to point out the things that they should do different, but morals and ethics tend to swing in the wind, do they not?
Yeah. Well, hopefully not that seems to be the case with some politicians, but I think the good and successful ones who are truly successful in changing cultures and direction, they have a core from which they come, and they're not putting their finger in the air and in the wind waiting to see where they need to go. I think President Trump has had a very strong core. I think President Biden has had a strong core. They have very different views of where the world should go. I think Christina has the kind of company that is critical to the future, right? We have, I've known Christina now and Clayton and Ted at Root Brand, and I am constantly amazed at the changes in pharma. As ambassador to Switzerland, I dealt a great deal with the pharma industry. It's one of the largest industries in Switzerland. And what I found is they are very dedicated, very successful, and a critical part of healthcare. But the fastest growing part of healthcare is what Christina is doing with nutraceuticals, homeopathy. And this is really very good for all of us because it gives us options. It's the fastest growing part of healthcare, of pharmacy, pharmacology. And I'm excited to see the kind of investment that she's making across the world that's really changing lives in wealthy communities and poor communities and doing things that are healthy. And I think any president, anyone looking to run for president in the United States needs to recognize the changing realities of healthcare, the changing realities of pharmacology. There are a lot of people who are very skeptical about what happened post-COVID. And we need to rebuild that confidence because we can't have in the United States and around the world, you run into people who have real doubts about, getting vaccines and doing all the things that we went through during COVID. And so, vaccines are important, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you the COVID vaccine solves anything. I've gotten COVID 3 times, and I've been vaccinated. Now, I didn't get it bad, but there are other vaccines like diphtheria and tetanus and things like that actually are saving lives. And so we need to restore the confidence in healthcare. And I think nutraceuticals and I think homeopathy, which the Swiss have been doing for generations, is a growing for a reason. And it's a good thing for healthcare.
So it sounds like you've been ahead of the curve for many years, Dr. Rahm. What do you contribute that to?
Well, I worked in the biotech and pharma industry for years. And of course, I was a mother. I've had cancer. I've had Lyme disease. I've gone through things like all of us from a healthcare perspective. And so for me, it was very transitional and imperative as an innovator and someone that invents patents and does things to understand vaccines are important, for example, understand that pharmaceutical and biotech products are imperative to this world and they save people's lives, but also understanding that there needs to be a transition. For example, I'm like Ed. I'm not for or against the vaccines. I think vaccines have helped our world in numerous areas. But when COVID happened, I think every president and prime minister across the world did what they thought was best. I really do. But the solution wasn't as positive as we all had hoped. And I think one of the answers to that is that you lean on, okay, if that wasn't a perfect solution, what do we do now? And doing things naturally that have delivery mechanisms that involve like nanotechnology, but they're not synthetic, can help people's bodies really heal from things like a virus or progress and live longer, which is why I think the next president is really important, that they understand if you want to live to be 130, then let's regenerate the body, let's reverse aging, and to do that, you can use natural things, and that's been a focus because I want the human body to be the most amazing thing it can be, and to do that, we need to put natural things in our body.
So, Dr. Rahm, I'm going to start with you, going back to what's happening in the world right now. We're here in Davos, and down the street there's this building called Ukraine. And outside the building, they have on the facade missiles, and they have high security to go in. You become president, you're inheriting this. And you know that Zelensky has a very powerful voice. What do you say? How do you handle it?
I met him briefly years ago in Ukraine, just so you know. But he was a much different person then. He was more of an actor and was really kind of the life of the party. It was interesting. And I know this has been a crisis. I've been to Ukraine and Russia many times. And the president that is in our office right now, as well as the former president, President Trump, they have a lot of experience in Russia as well as Ukraine. And I know that there's a divided interest between the two. I will say this. I don't feel like the war, from my perspective, as a mother, as a scientist, as a businesswoman, I don't feel like this war was needed. I think it could have been prevented. I think hopefully by stepping in, we can, the next president by stepping in can make some changes for global initiatives of peace instead of global initiatives of war.
Well said. Mr. Ambassador, I'm not going to quote because I don't recall the congressman's name, but he had said that Ukraine is not our friend and Putin is not our enemy. What do you think about that?
Well, I think where we are in the United States right now is that we actually do consider, most Americans consider Ukraine to be a friend. And during the 90s and the post-communist regime, Russia was a friend as well. Many Americans were investing heavily in Russia and in Ukraine, and there was no problem with commerce, and things were moving just fine. I think that the goal should be resolution to this conflict. Americans are not going to support decades of war and the dollars that would require and the lives that it could potentially require as well. I think Dr. Rahm's view here is very indicative of what many women and men see in America, that we have to find a way to peace. And I know that the Russians and the Ukrainians will tell you that that's not going to happen right now, that there are things that are obstacles to that. Well, the next president's job is going to have to be working with NATO, working with allies, and finding a way to peace. Because there's no way we can continue to fund this. There are real needs in the United States, infrastructure needs, diversion of funds to things that are just not productive in war, and in military-industrial complex are becoming very controversial in the U.S., more so than I've ever seen, and it transcends party. Republicans tend to be the hawks, Democrats the doves. You're seeing a homogenization of that in the U.S., and this war has really, I think, articulated pretty well, been a good example of how Americans are frustrated and unwilling to continue. So, a diplomatic solution as a former diplomat, or as a diplomat, because I still involve myself in foreign policy, and the former ambassador from Ukraine to Switzerland became one of my very, very close friends. And so I've been educated well on what the Ukrainian perspective is, and we share their concerns, right? I mean, this is very important that Russia remain in Russia, that Ukraine be able to survive and live free. And that should be our ultimate goal in the end.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Moving to the southern border. Now, many years ago, I thought I knew because I only had one perspective. And then I sat on this board called the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service Board. And I got to learn that not everybody immigrating were bad. Not everybody coming over, their motives were to rape, pillage, destroy. That there were people coming to look to create a new life, a new opportunity, to bring their children to a new place, to a new country, so they could build a new foundation. The United States for many years has had a major flux of immigrants. Talk about the policy, because if somebody has to come in illegally, then it sounds like the policy to enter might be too challenging.
Well, okay, so I have probably a little controversial opinion about this. I do think that the United States needs to open ourselves to other countries. However, I also believe that each country has to protect its assets, which are the people. So your American citizens, and this is because I am an American citizen, are very important. Just like if you're in Greece, the citizens are very important. You have to preserve the economy and take care of your own people. It's kind of like my children have a lot of friends that I love so much that my children are my first responsibility. So a president, in my opinion, has to create policy to protect his people. And sometimes that means, unfortunately, not letting everyone into a country or making it a little bit harder. I have friends all over the world that I love and think the world of, and I would never hurt them and I would always help them. But I do understand policy in the United States to protect our people and our economy and what we do so that we can bring in individuals to make our country stronger and our people stronger. We understood why we had to stay home during a pandemic. We've got to understand why sometimes we have to create barriers around countries to protect our own people. And again, I know that's not everyone's opinion, but that's my opinion.
Well, I mean, I think the rule of law is the center of the question, right? The rule of law matters. In the United States, we have had a process by which you become a citizen that is a standard that most Americans continue to cherish and want to see reinstated because, the greatness of America is its diversity. We have Greeks, we have Irish, we have English, we have Muslims, we have great diversity in our country. And that adds to the, I think, brilliance of America. Having illegal aliens coming across the Rio Grande who are just coming into the country, having prisons emptied in South America and around the world, then coming through that direction into the U.S., we don't know how to keep America secure when that environment exists. And it's the safety of the American citizens. Having the Hispanic community that I know and engage with who came to the U.S. legally, the hardest working people, totally engaged in America, they love the country and become great citizens and a part of the culture and the melting pot. The people coming over illegally, these legal Hispanic communities are very frustrated and angry because of the crime and the problems that emerge from these illegal aliens. They start off coming to the U.S. breaking the law. So the question becomes, how do we resolve this? President Trump had a resolution to this during his term, his 4 years, the lowest engagement of illegal immigration. It's not immigration. It's actually immigrants come here legally. These are criminals that come across that border illegally, breaking the U.S. law and then becoming a problem for the United States. Those who want to come legally, there's a process. That process exists. I find it fascinating that I run into Swiss business people who have a hard time getting a visa to come into the United States and work and be a major contributing part to our economy, while there are hundreds of thousands, millions coming across our border by swimming across the river.
So you're seeing them almost, what they're doing is bypassing passport control.
Absolutely, that's all they do. And it's not just Mexicans, it's frankly very few Mexicans, frankly. It's South Americans who are in oppressed areas. It's Central Americans. It's criminals who've been released from many of these countries from prison to leave and send them up here. It's the families, the children and women who have been victimized by people who've been paid to bring them here, and then they take advantage of them. The crime that exists in the process of getting them here is amazing. But there are also people coming from places all over the world, in the Middle East, terrorists, and you have Chinese. We don't know who they are, and you just don't know who's coming across the border if you don't have a border. It's so porous, it is so dangerous that the United States, I believe this will be the critical fundamental issue in the U.S. elections.
Thank you. And moving over to healthcare now. So post-COVID, it's created new entrepreneurs that are now seeing the rising cost of health insurance premiums. My family premium alone in the United States, it always shocks my European friends that I pay $1,200 a month for health insurance for my wife, my 13-year-old, and my 10-year-old. Why are health insurance premiums so high? What can we do different? Because there needs to be reform. It needs to happen. It needs to be one where we have something that is bipartisan. And I've heard you go time and time again talking about big pharma. Are they the problem?
I don't think Big Pharma is the problem. I actually enjoyed working in the biotech and pharmaceutical industry. I think there has to be a transition, like I said, to the naturopathic, homeopathic route so that we can preserve money, for example. So I am one of the scientists that's conducted patient registries throughout the United States, and now we have one in 76 countries. We're tracking per a diagnosis what is the quality and cost of healthcare. And we're finding that if people do natural supplements and take natural things and use their basically all their resources correctly, that they have better healthcare, so they're not in the hospital as much. In the United States of America, we have advancements in healthcare that no one else has. We really do. We have, for example, human monoclonal antibodies and different bioprinting that's not available throughout the world. So our cost is higher, and we are the leaders in pharmaceutical and biotech and development, and that cost our country, a lot of money. I do understand the development side because I was in research and development, but I think we have to make a transition, like I said, to doing things that will save us in the healthcare arena, including insurance and policies, and that means we have to find out how do we do natural things so that we don't get sick, and if we get sick, how do we help our bodies recover without having to go to the hospital and stay for 7 days, because that cost is why you are spending $1,200. You're basically covering the cost of other people in the hospital as well when you're an American citizen. So I think this is something the next president needs to take on as an item to really change and to invent and to solve in the United States. And I think that he will. I do.
So as a journalist, I tend to be able to ask more questions of people, so I appreciate the... what I'm hearing from most Americans around the world now is that they want someone who's not a politician. And that has been what Mr. Trump, President Trump, has been. He was not a politician, which means they're going to say things and do things that you probably aren't going to agree with because they're going to speak... They're going to be unorthodox. So it's final words to you, Mr. Ambassador. Speak to those out there. They're on the sidelines, and they're not sure how they should vote. They're not sure how they should make a decision, either because of indoctrination or maybe some preconceived opinions. Speak to them.
Yeah, I think every American has to decide what it is they want out of their government. And I think many Americans are concluding that our economy was in great shape. It is no longer. That our energy situation, the crisis that we're in right now, is devastating our economy and the world economies, frankly, by not having the supply that we did under President Trump and now having to deal with some of the issues emerging. They are becoming problematic. I think with immigration and that crisis, those are the fundamental issues in this election in the U.S. And foreign policy. I think looking at the wars and the danger zones and the hot spots around the world, looking at Israel and the fact that we see anti-Semitism on the rise is just mind-boggling to me. I mean, I cannot believe we're in the 21st century and we're having this discussion on campuses in the United States, that people are even accepting that is a dialogue worth having. It's just mind-numbing. But I do think that the civilized world is repelling from that. It is repulsive. It cannot be tolerated. And I think we see it on both sides of the aisle too. What I truly believe is that we're seeing more and more of the traditional party politics playing less and less a role. People want a leader. They want a bold, firm leader to stand up and represent the United States, the leader of the free world. And we need that again. We haven't had it. We've had a gentleman, and Mr. Biden, President Biden, who I've known, and he's just been in politics all his life, and I think he's ready to move on, and I hope he does, and I hope we see some change.
So if I ever could have the opportunity to give him a message, as a father of a 10-year-old daughter who is the love of my life, it would be amazing at some point to see him choose a vice president who's a strong woman, a businesswoman, because that's what the world needs.
Well, and we have some great candidates for that. President Trump has an amazing, people don't know this, but in his business, some of the top leaders most of the top leaders in his business were all women. I mean, they were not men who were in the C-suite and in the boardroom.
So this doesn't get out, by the way. No one talks about
these are the things that the media doesn't want you to know. He appreciates very strong, bright women. He promoted them. They ran his business, and they made him successful. If you look at his last administration, he had some of the most brilliant, really sharp women in government, in business, and in politics. I think you can expect President Trump to make the best choice for who could serve as president if something happened to him. That's the priority of any president choosing a vice president. It shouldn't be about race, gender, or anything else. It should be competence. But we have some amazing women that the president can consider, former senators, governors, others, and business people who I think he would entertain. But we also have some really great options for the future of his party, the Republican Party. And I think we're going to see some interesting opportunities.
Well, thank you, Greek House, and for your voice. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you, Dustin. Good
Thank
to
you,
be with
Dustin.
you.
Thank you.